So we outsource our trash collection to Waste Management, Republic, companies like that. We do not use the City of Houston's garbage service. So we have 2 days a week trash collection versus 1 day a week in the city. And we have backdoor service, which means the garbage cans come to our back door and pick up our trash and bring them out to the street where the trucks are. So we get the money for the garbage cans today through the general fund. So in essence, because we don't use the city's garbage fee, the garbage service, we are subsidizing other people in the city's trash cans. So because it comes out of the general fund, which we pay into, we get nothing out of it because we don't use the garbage of the collection for the city of Houston. So in essence, we are subsidizing all the garbage cans for the city of Houston because we don't get anything out of it. We don't use the city of Houston's trash collection. And we also pay money out of our homeowners association to use the private trash collection. So my feeling on the trash can is if you use them, you pay for them. If you don't use them, like my residents don't use them, you will not get charged a single penny for this. We will not pay the $1.14. You will because you use the City of Houston garbage services. So in essence, my folks are not going to be assessed this because we don't use City of Houston garbage. So you get what you pay for. We don't receive trash cans, therefore we don't pay for it. But you do, so you should pay for them. So quit subsidizing, my residents subsidizing your garbage cans. We're not paying you anymore.
See, when you look at it that way, and so
you're buying?
Well, listen. So I'm excluded because I'm a renter who doesn't get a City of Houston garbage can. So I'm still excluded.
Exactly.
However, I'm picking up the fight for the others who have to do it. But I mean, I think from your district, it does. I mean, that perspective makes a lot of sense. I have yet to see an argument for the rest of the folks who are currently paying taxes and get City of Houston garbage cans and now have to pay that fee. So that's what I'm waiting for. And I don't expect you to have to explain it because clearly most of your district doesn't have that problem and you're paying for everybody else. So.
Right, but let me take you back to 2017 after Hurricane Harvey. People were screaming at me to get rid of the trash on their lawn. They cleaned out their house, threw their garbage, all their valuables, their keepsakes on their front lawn, and they wanted it out of there. The City of Houston, we don't have the equipment to do that. So we had to bring in San Antonio, and they did a great job because they have a garbage fee, number one, and they have fantastic equipment. They had 40 grapplers, which are the big cranes that come in and pick it up and load it into the trucks.
Right.
We had about 40 grapplers and about 60 garbage collection trucks. And I fast forward to hurricane season this year, and if we don't have San Antonio doing our trash collection, people will be screaming at me again. So you get what you pay for. You don't have a garbage fee. We have bad equipment in the City of Houston when it comes to garbage collection. They're horrible trucks. That's why we get ours outsourced, because we don't want their crappy equipment. Pardon my French. It's bad.
So what does the fee go into? It's going to get new trucks? Is it going to better service? Where is that?
No, it's just gonna reimburse us for the garbage bin that we use. The green ones for recycling, the black ones for general garbage. All it is getting our money back, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. So it won't come out of the general fund anymore. It'll come off of your water bill at $1.14 a month, and you will pay for it, not me. Or you're a renter, so you won't.
Yeah, I won't pay for it either. But yeah,
the folks that get City of Houston garbage collection will pay $1.14.
Right. Yes, they have to pay.
We're not paying a penny.
Given it passes tomorrow, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, to be determined, I guess. But I'm assuming
it's going to be a close vote. I'll tell you that. I think a lot of people are like you. I don't like fees. I don't like taxes. I'm anti-fee, anti-tax, but I'm also anti-subsidizing. We subsidize the city. We pay money and we never get our fair share back. Right. We never do. And we don't expect our fair share back. But when it comes to this is our way of making sure that we don't subsidize your garbage cans in the future.
Fair. Okay, that's fair. All right. So that's up for tomorrow. That's up tomorrow for debate and vote. Today, the budget came out. I think it was much anticipated. These past couple of months, we heard from the controller projecting deficits and downturns. You said it was going to be a tight budget. The mayor said it was going to be a tight budget. So I don't think it came as a surprise to anyone that it actually was a very tight budget. So to kind of talk about some of the top lines. $5.1 billion overall budget, about a 1.5% increase from last year, but I think there was about the same amount decrease just in general fund spending, if I'm not mistaken. 107 million.
You're right.
Is that right?
Good. You paid attention.
And listen, I tried to. This is the most exciting time of the year, truly. Like
There you go. I like it. So the gap was about $170 million that we had to overcome. As you mentioned, this year's budget is $5.1 billion. Last year's was $5.03 billion. And a large portion of that's the general fund. It's about $2.53 billion in the general fund. The rest of that is the enterprise fund, predominantly the airport and Houston Public Works. So we're really going to have to keep our eye on the enterprise fund for the first time because of what's going on with airline travel, because we get a lot of our fees per passenger. So the general fund is $2.53 billion, which is a decrease of 1% over last year. Okay. Last year's was at $2.55 billion. The biggest deficit that we're seeing is sales tax. The sales tax revenue projections for us is about a $100 million decrease from what we received last year. And not only sales tax revenue, but the franchise fees that we have, we're going to see a decrease in franchise fees. This is Dave Martin's opinion. I think we're going to see a decrease in property values. I think we're going to see a decrease in the property tax collection that we received last year. Right. So it's not only the sales tax revenue. I think we're going to see a substantial decrease on the property tax side because houses aren't selling, people are out of jobs, and the market is going to be depressed a little bit. So I think it's going to be a budget that we're going to have to keep a really good lookout for. The way we overcome it is the predominant number of dollars that we've really saved in our savings account is called our fund balance. Mm-hmm. And we are required to keep 7.5% in our fund balance. For the last couple of years, we've maintained our fund balance with many million dollars, tens of $1 million over the required 7.5%. This is the first time we're going to actually drop below 7.5%. We're going to look at about 7.1% in the fund balance. And, the fund balance is used predominantly by the credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, some of those agencies that look at our bonds and our performance and say, hey, they're a good city of Houston or they're not. So with us going from 7.5 down to 7, I really don't think it's that big of a difference when it comes to the rating agencies. So it's going to be interesting to see if they downgrade us or if they leave it at the same. We think that, given all the indicators are that they're going to leave it around where it is today. So the number of things that we're having to cut, Charles, is we need more police officers. We had 5 cadet classes that were pre-budget included in the 2021 budget. We cut those. We're going to have to furlough about 3,000 City of Houston employees. And unlike the state of Texas, unlike the federal government, we're a service company. We talked about trash collection. We pick up your trash. We protect you with police and fire. We fix your streets. So the predominant number of our dollars, over 65%, are in people. Right. So the only way we can make a difference is to cut employees, to furlough employees. We're not going to furlough HPD employees. We're not going to furlough firefighters, and we're not going to furlough solid waste management trash collectors. But we are going to furlough parks, libraries, and folks like that to the tune of about 3,000 employees that will be furloughed, probably a maximum of 10 days. So it's a pretty tight budget. We're going to have to really look at this closely as we go through the years, this year, and make sure that we do the furlough piece. We may have to go more than 10. We could probably go less than 10. Just depends on what the projections are for the sales tax revenue.
So I mean, 3,000 employees, that's, even though the city has what, I think 22,000 employees, that's still a significant number. So what does that mean in terms of taxpayers? Like, am I going to see service cuts because of that? Where do you guys think you're going to be furloughing?
Oh, absolutely. So if you look at it, if it's not police, if it's not fire, and if it's not trash collection, and remember, Public Works fixing your streets, that's the enterprise fund.
Mhm.
Port, that's the enterprise fund. So you're going to look at hours in libraries being cut. Maybe some lack of maintenance in some of the park areas where people are going to be calling me in the summer and going, why aren't you cutting the grass in the parks? Well, we have to scale back a little bit on that. The bark, the dog collections or the dog catchers that we have out there, we're going to have to look at that as well. So it's going to be a lot of what people would classify as non-essential city services. We're going to have to look at hours cuts and staff reductions. So the way we've run the city, I can't tell you the number of complaints I get in the summer months because the grass in the median's too high. People want their grass cut in the median every week like they like their lawn cut. That's not going to happen this year. Get used to it. We're going to have high grass and medians. So the libraries are going to have to be, we're going to shave some of the hours off. So it's going to be, as the mayor likes to call it, it's going to be shared sacrifices. City's going to have to sacrifice, but so are the tax residents and taxpayers in the city of Houston.
Fair. So there's talking about kind of this CARES Act money, and if I don't ask this, firefighters are going to beat me up. They're going to beat you up either way. So I think but with the $404 million, they've been making the argument that some of that could be used potentially for to pay them. I know that the mayor announced today that some of that would be going to pay the deferment for the Houston Zoo. Are you guys looking at other ways? Yeah.
Yeah. The firefighters want their money. I get it. They should get a raise. They really should. They're underpaid when you look at benchmarking data from other cities. But the CARES Act was pretty implicit about what you can use those dollars for. And there were 4 categories, and they were all related to expenses. So the CARES Act was a great congressional item for cities like New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, New Orleans, who looked at, I'll give you the city I came from if you can't tell by my goofy accent, New Orleans. New Orleans moved ahead with Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras brings in a lot of sales tax revenue, a lot. So they went ahead with Mardi Gras. We shut down our big sales tax revenue producer, the rodeo, on March 11th. On March 17th, we made the decision, Charles, to start cutting back on shut down bars and restaurants and only doing to-go service.
Right.
So we knew we were going to sacrifice sales tax revenue to protect people's lives. Look at New Orleans and the number of deaths they had in New Orleans. We've had less deaths in the state of Texas than they've had in the city of New Orleans. And why is that? My opinion is they looked at sales tax revenue and valued sales tax revenue over lives. And they're paying for their sins. They incurred a lot of expenses because of that. So they needed PPE. They needed to take their convention center and open up a hospital in it. Same thing with the Javits Center in New York. So there were a lot of expense items that they had to pay for. Well, the CARES is great because it reimburses you for expenses. Believe it or not, our expenses were pretty limited because we didn't have to create new hospital facilities. The ICUs in the city of Houston never went above 50% occupancy, never. And they still continue down that path. So we didn't have a lot of expenses. So what we did was we sacrificed our sales tax revenue. So what we're asking for from our congressional leaders, and we had a call about 2 weeks ago, and every single congressional leader in the city of Houston, including Senators Corn and Cruz, agreed with us that we should be given flexibility to use some of our CARES dollars for revenue replacement. But that opened up the argument from cities like Chicago, who has a huge pension liability, New York, who has a huge pension liability, not only on the state level, but the local level.
LA.
And for the most part, we solved our pension liability in 2017 on the backs of the people you just talked about, firefighters, police officers, and city workers. but we closed that quite a bit. So we would like some flexibility in revenue replacement. This is Dave Martin's proposal, is if your sales tax revenue was $100 million in last fiscal year, then we should have the flexibility to go up to that $100 million, not to take a penny more for revenue higher than what we had last year. So the city of Chicago, who wants to solve their pension liability situation. So if they had $100 million in sales tax revenue, they shouldn't be able to take CARES money that's $300 million, because we know where that's going to go to. So up to the level of the last fiscal year, your sales tax revenue, and just use it for revenue replacement. That's all we're asking for, is a little flexibility.
And does it seem as though that I mean, and you said the senators are open-minded to it. Does it seem as though there's any sort of movement toward, I know they're building the new CARES package now, so is there any sort of interest in that from DC or?
So here's my fiscal conservative view on that. So the city of Houston received $404 million. It's sitting in our bank right now. Okay. We don't need any more money. We really don't. We don't need CARES 3 and CARES 4. Right. You hear New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, New Orleans, they're screaming about, we need another CARES package to replace the lost revenue. Well, we don't want that to happen. Just give us a flexibility within the original package that we already have that money deposited in our bank, sitting there. Just give us a little bit of flexibility to use it for revenue replacement. And we don't see the need to have the Federal Reserve printing more money. All they're going to do is just print another $1 trillion and give it out, which is devaluing the present value of dollars today and probably going to put us into a quasi-depression. You know, you can't continually print money without it affecting your value of your dollar today. That's economics 101.
Right. One of the things that that was built into the budget the mayor announced today was, I think it was $20 million removed from the Economic Stabilization Fund to bridge the gap. And so that's obviously very concerning, because this is the fund we would pull from in terms of a hurricane or any other sort of disaster in which we needed immediate funds. So, you know, what are your thoughts there? I mean, it's definitely alarming heading into, we're 4 weeks away or 2.5 weeks away from hurricane.
Well, there's a hurricane. I just looked at a weather report. They're worried about a hurricane entering the Gulf, you know, sometime next week. And it'll be the first hurricane to ever enter the Gulf before June. So that's a realistic thing we're looking at.
Yeah.
Well, you have the stabilization fund and you have fund balance. Okay. So he decided to pull it off the stabilization fund to the tune of 20 million, which depletes that fund. But if we maintain 7% in the fund balance, we still could go a little bit lower without being affected in a negative bond rating from the bond rating agencies. So I think we're okay in pulling it as long as we have the ability in the event of an emergency. And all we're really doing out of that, Charles, is taking money as a line of credit and using it today to be reimbursed by FEMA somewhere down the road. So all we need is for the instant infusion of cash, and we can pull that off of fund balance as long as we have the obligation to replace it within fund balance. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, because we still have 7% sitting in fund balance that we can use, and that's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay. So to repeat that in dumbed down form for myself, essentially what you're saying is that you're pulling it from the Economic Stabilization Fund, but the creditors aren't looking at it as much as they would look at the general fund. So God forbid something did happen, we still have that general fund money. And in that, we wouldn't really be too worried if they were going to downgrade us if we're trying to recover from a hurricane.
Yes. What we could have done is we could have left stabilization at the same level it is today and pulled more money out of fund balance. So instead of taking fund balance to 7%, we could have taken it to 6.5 or 6% and used the same amount of money. It was just the mayor wanted to do it differently to send a different message to the credit ratings, because when we go to borrow money for projects that we're doing, when we go to really look for lines of credit, we don't want a negative valuation on our bonds. And we don't want to be able to issue bonds to the market and it really paying more for it than we really should. We'll pay a high percentage interest rate.
Right.
So I think it was a either or, and
Yeah.
he chose to go down that path. And I don't argue. We're not going to get dinged on the stabilization pull down, but we'll get dinged if we went below, 6.5% on the general fund balance.
Right, right, right. One of the things you talked about during some of the earlier budget hearings was, there's been some pushback over the zero-based budgeting process and how, time consuming it is and how it hasn't produced these savings and a bunch of other things.
Wah, wah, wah. Yeah.
You said something that I thought really hit the nail on the head was that, I read something where it said 2,100 cities across the country right now are scrambling to try to find cuts and furloughs and this and that to make up their budgets. And what you said around that time was that because we put zero-based budgeting in practice, we did all of that planning prior to. So we're not scrambling right now in time of crisis trying to figure out what we need to do. And so it seems like it was, whether it produces savings or not, it seems like it was a fruitful process because we have these kind of different budgets to look at. I guess it was worst case scenario, kind of status quo, and best case scenario. And so what are your thoughts on how the process played out? And do you think we should continue it going forward?
I absolutely do. And the reason why is because, was it time consuming? Absolutely. Was it a good process that you really were able to get in there and examine your expenses and take everything to zero and build it up from there? I think it was. But because I did my city council budget, and it really made me think about the number of people I have in my office and the amount of money I spend. So each department was required to do 3 budget scenarios. One was a realistic budget. Where do we think realistically we need to be in fiscal year 21? The other one was an optimistic budget. What if we get in more property tax revenue? What if we get in more sales tax revenue on the top line that takes us to another level? What are some projects that are not absolutely don't fit into the necessary to have, but if we had more money, what would be a luxury that we could spend it on? Now you take the counter to that, we did a pessimistic budget. And the pessimistic budget was, what if we had an oil downturn like we saw in the 80s, where we had to really cut back on our spending? Because it's not about revenue then, it's about spending.
Right.
So what can we cut off of the spending side of the equation to get down to where we saw in 1980s with the oil bust? Well, guess what? We're below that point now. So we're looking at our estimate. What we did was we already had the realistic, optimistic, and pessimistic budget. So we just took the dust off the pessimistic budget and took the numbers and submitted it, and then made a few more cuts and saw some different revenue sources come in. And then we were able to actually do the budget a lot quicker with more efficiency because we always had those pessimistic budgets with budget cuts examined. So we didn't have to go back and redo everything and look at taking more money out because we already did 3 scenarios. So if I were to make a recommendation to any city that does zero-based budget, make sure you do it with a realistic and optimistic and a pessimistic budget projection because it worked real easy for us.
Yeah. Well, one reason I appreciate it is because I think what I'm concerned about all these cities scrambling to cover their budgets is that the decisions they make today, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, may not prove to be the wisest cuts or decisions to make because they made it in time of being rushed and in times of crisis. So that's one of my favorite things that have come out of this budget cycle was to have those 3 different options and be able to kind of lay them out on the table. And no one knew this was going to happen, but it did. And now, we have something fully formed there for us to take advantage of.
Right. And another advantage, I think, was our budget year starts on July 1. So we only had the last quarter of fiscal year 2020 that was negatively affected by sales tax revenue. And that was the months of April, May, and June. Mm-hmm. So the April numbers really didn't come in until, the beginning of May. So it really didn't affect us in April, even though we shut everything down on March 11th and shut down bars on March 17th. We already knew where those numbers were coming in. So now when we do the budget, we're doing it for 12 months at start July, and we're doing it with the full implication of COVID-19 negatively affecting us. So a lot of the cities that go from a January to December budget they got caught in the middle of the fiscal year, so they're going to have to draw fund balance down quite substantially to get through these next 6 months or so.
Right.
We didn't have to do that because we're already preparing for our fiscal year that begins for us on July 1.
Right. One thing, I don't know if you saw, but the other day, I guess it might have been either Friday or maybe just Monday this week, a report came out where it said State Senator Jane Nelson was talking about what she's doing to fix the state budget and what they're going to do. And they were like, well, we're going to have to implement very stringent zero-based budgeting guidelines going forward. So it's
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And what's funny about them is I think they're going to have to go into a special session. I think because of the impact on their budget right now that was done last year, and we had a lot of money in the state coffers last year. When oil is priced at negative $35, like it was a couple of weeks ago, that sends a clear message. And they're going to have to go back. I think, I'm not Nostradamus, but I'm going to predict a special session coming for those folks this year to fix the budget that they did in 2019.
Right. That would make sense. I mean,
they're going to have to.
Yeah, I don't know how you can survive otherwise. I mean, really. So one of another thing you brought up during the budget hearings is the fact that we have yet to actually pass a structurally balanced budget. We balance it every year, land sales, deferments, drawdowns, all these other ways to kind of bring in more revenue to balance it, but we haven't structurally balanced it. And so, I mean, what do we have to do to get to that point? Obviously, it needs to be a long-term plan to get there, but what is holding us back from getting to that point?
So the reason why we don't have a structurally balanced budget is because we have, and every company in America, every city and state has this, it's called OPEB, other post-employment benefits, mainly hospitalization. So when our folks retire, and the problem in city government and state government is these folks can retire when they're 50 years old because they started work when they were 20 or 25, they can reach the rule of 75 or 80, whatever that is, years of service combined with age. So they can retire as very healthy individuals that can continue working at some other entity.
Right.
We're responsible for paying their health care costs. So one of the things that always intrigued me is, I hate to say this, but when I retire, I'm going to be able to get hospitalization from the city of Houston. And a lot of our retirees are going to be able to grab that. And a young guy like you don't need hospitalization really, because we talked about subsidies on my garbage cans. You're subsidizing by paying medical insurance for guys like me, us old guys that are over the age of 60, because you're not going to get sick. I mean, COVID has taught us this.
Right.
If you're under the age of 40 and you get COVID-19, you're not even going to know it. But if you're over the age of 65, you're generally going to be not as healthy. You're going to have underlying conditions. If you get COVID-19, you better beware because you're going to get sick and it's not going to be a good outlook for you. My point in saying that is we have to have these post-employment benefits paid out of the general fund each and every year. So in order to do that, that's to the tune of another additional $200 million to pass a structurally balanced budget. Because what I would have to do is pay the medical costs for those retirees in the present day budget, which means instead of it being $170 million budget deficit, add another 200 to 250 on top of that, then we'd be looking at a significant $350, $400 million budget cut. And remember, almost 70% of our general fund is people, is salaries. That just means bodies cut. And it's not going to be librarians. Then you'd have to dig into police and fire and public works. And that's not anything that somebody wants to look at.
Right.
So it's a tough thing. As I don't think you'll be able to pass a structurally balanced budget until you fix the retiree benefits on hospitalization and demand that your employees, when they reach 65 and a half, grab Medicare from the government and not have your health costs funded by the city of Houston in their OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Or as Chris Brown and I have been talking about for years, is creating an OPEB trust account.
Mhm.
Can take some money and fund it, maybe not to the full 100%, but 25 to 50%, so it cuts down on the long-term liability that you continue to incur. Because as it did with the pensions, you know, $1 million today is $5 million tomorrow, is $20 million in 5 years. It keeps accruing, and we'll never get out of it unless we create a trust account for it.
And I think didn't GASB, the Government Accountant Standards Board, recommend cities to do that, to look at an OPEB trust as a way to address their liabilities there?
Yes, they did a couple of years ago, but I don't think any city or state is really doing it.
Right.
But the reason why they did that is because you were legally required through GASB regulations to disclose that in your financial documents. Before, as you remember, Charles, we never had to disclose our pension liability,
Right.
nor our other post-employment benefits, our OPEB liability. So cities would present their budget, and people didn't know how much of a pension liability you had out there for their retirees, and how much of a OPEB liability you had out there for predominantly healthcare costs that were being accrued each and every year.
Yeah.
And until GASB jumped in and said, no, you must present this in your financial documents, which I applaud as an accountant.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I remember when that budget came out, there was either the budget or the CAFR that came out right after that, and the net position just dropped, and everybody
was horrible.
Oh, like,
yeah, that was right on the heels of us solving our pension liability. You know, taking in the pension obligation bonds and issuing those, and then all of a sudden people went, "Wait a minute, I thought you solved this." And I kept saying, "No, it's two buckets of money. One is pension obligations to pay people their retirement pay, and the other is other post-employment benefits, which is predominantly health costs. So you have pension and you have health costs, two different buckets.
Right.
Solved one, but we didn't solve the other.
Right. So, well, I've taken up more than the time that I asked for, but since you mentioned OPEB, it kind of took me to my last question anyway, which was, kind of post-COVID, post-budget vote, what are some of the long-term things that you as chair of budget and fiscal affairs, also as mayor pro tem, are looking at, to make the city more fiscally sound? I mean, I know the OPEB trust is one of them, but what else out there are you taking a look at or hoping to see come through this that we can hope for?
Yeah, and my big issue is it's really OPEB, because it's on our balance sheet now, and it's other post-employment benefits. So I am a conservative Republican, an accountant by trade, and Mayor Turner is a lawyer who's a Democrat. So we should be on the opposite ends of the spectrum on this. But I always tell people Mayor Turner is cheap. He is extremely fiscally conservative. He is a cheap man. He really is. And by cheap, I mean he is extremely fiscally conservative. Now, Dave Martin and Sylvester Turner are probably on the opposite ends on the social scale. He's a Democrat, I'm a Republican, so we look at things a little bit differently. So you look at me being mayor pro tem, we should never get along. But we get along extremely well because he is a fiscal hawk. He really is truly tough on the budget. He understands that when we went with pension reform in 2017. Now the next gear is, before he leaves, I want to implement an OPEB trust account so that we start whittling off some of the debt that we've incurred. Not that we incurred it during the Mayor Turner administration. Right. It goes back to Mayor Turner's first 4 years, Mayor Parker, Mayor White, to the beginning of time when we started accumulating this. It's sort of like, Charles, how did we get here? Right. We got here by having bad fiscal policy. And one of the things that we did last year was we put together a fiscal policy manual, and we're adhering to that. And one of the things that before I leave in the next 3.5 years is I want to start whittling off the debt that we've incurred because of the post-employment benefits. And I think that's by creating a trust account. So unfortunately, COVID-19 happened and really threw us for on our heels. I think had COVID-19 not happened, the price of oil was at a great spot. The revenue we were receiving, the city was blowing and going. Conventions were coming in. You know, we had a lot of revenue for hotel occupancy, so we could start fueling a lot of things. And a lot of things that we can't fuel now is the trust account we would have created for the post-employment benefits. So the unfortunate thing is, I don't think we're going to see a pickup in this year. I think it'll probably be, you know, you hear the economic guys saying it's going to be a 3 to 5 year proposition. So that'll be for the next mayor to pick up and the next city council member to pick up. But I think they need to keep that in their front window and make sure it's addressed within some of the benchmarks that they do and prepare for.
Right. I definitely agree there. All right. Well, I appreciate you so much for taking the time out to do this. Any parting words, any place they can find you? I don't know if you know your own. I was going to say, if you want to give your Twitter handle a shout out. I feel like you might not know your own Twitter handle.
You know, look at me, I'm not the greatest tweeter in the world, but I'll leave it. You know, I am at CM Dave Martin.
Got it.
That's my Twitter handle. I'll self-admit I'm not very good at Facebook and Twitter. I'm getting better every day. My kids laugh at me because I'm an old fuddy-duddy. But, you know, the thing that we need to look at is as we start economically open the city back up, I predict, we'll see, I think the next move the governor's going to make within the next 14 days is he's going to open up restaurants at 50% occupancy. I was quite surprised, Charles, that he didn't take that step up front. Mm-hmm. I was surprised he's tiered it in at 25 and then we'll go to 50. And, you know, the thing that we need to be cognizant of is as we open up the city even more, look at what happened in Korea. One guy affected all those folks in Korea. Right. And now they're in trouble because one person went to crowded bars, not to one, he went to 4 bars. Yeah. Infected a lot of people. My fear is when the city of Houston opens up like that, we're going to have a lot of the younger crowd that's anxious to get out and see their friends again. And for the folks that are over the age of 65, they need to be really practicing their social distancing and wearing their masks wherever they go, because I don't want to see that negatively affect us. So we're going to have to really look at our numbers and really look at the science and make sure, because we have to open up the city. We really do. We're suffering right now. People need to be employed. And in order to do that, we need to take that next step. And that next step is restaurants at 50%, health clubs opening up again. I can't wait to get back into the gym. I run every day, but I can't wait to get back into the gym. And we need to do that. And we need to do it in baby steps. So be prepared for that and make sure that people stay safe, keep practicing social distancing, wear your face shields and your mask, and do everything the right way. Because if you look at us and compare them to our friends in Dallas or our friends just south of us in Galveston, by the way, Galveston kept their bars open for 10 days after we shut ours down on the 17th. Oh, wow. They have, per capita, they have more cases than Harris County or any county in the state of Texas. Wow. I think that reverts back to them on making a bad decision. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Judge Mark Henry, but I think you made a bad decision.
Well, if you weren't being honest, it wouldn't be you. So thank you very much.
Well, you know me, if I'm not telling you the straight scoop, you know, I'm not the most politically correct person in the world, but you know, I appreciate the opportunity to work with you. You're a great man, and you do a great job on informing people of conservative politics and making sure we do things in a fiscally responsible way. And I think you'll see this budget is fiscally responsible. You know, City Council has 2 decisions to make. You either vote yes on the budget or you vote no on the budget. But you do have the ability to put forward amendments to the budget. So if you put forward amendments and the mayor takes them, like last year, we had one council member who put forward, I think it was about 10 amendments. Mm-hmm. And all 10 amendments were passed by council. So you make an amendment to address the deficiency within the budget. So if you have all 10 of your amendments passed, wouldn't you assume that you'll vote for the budget? Didn't vote for the budget. And my question was, wait a minute, you had all your amendments passed, If you had a problem with it, you should have put another amendment through, but you voted against the budget. That wasn't fair. So look back in your archives and see what I'm referring to.
Yes, I certainly will. But I am
He's a
excited.
good friend of mine.
Listen, I'm with you. I hear you. The one good thing, or a couple of good things that came out of that last budget, though, was Knox's amendment, which led us to zero-based budgeting this year. So I'm excited that that made it.
Let's make sure of that. So that was the Dave Martin amendment that I put forward ever since I stepped foot in council on day one with Anise D. Parker. And I put that forward every year because Knox comes first because he's at large. Amendment for zero base was included in his, but he never addresses that. It was Knox Martin amendment for zero base budgeting. But he always says, yeah, it was my amendment. But Mike Knox, you know darn good and well, I've been talking about zero-based budgeting before you were on council. So here I put forward the zero-based budgeting, and it finally passed. So thank you, Mike. But it was the Knox/Martin, or as I like to say, Martin/Knox amendment.
Well, from here on out, the record shall be corrected. It is the Martin/Knox amendment.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you again so much. Stay safe out there, and have fun on that garbage fee vote tomorrow. And I'll be watching the rest of the budget hearings and the final vote. So really appreciate you.
$1.14. You can afford it. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Hey, it's good being with you, Charles.
You too. You too. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.